Coming up on the show, parts of Georgia feels like the bullseye when it comes to tornadoes. Why this has been an active storm-filled month. We'll talk about that coming up. Plus, a new round of pardons being doled out by President Donald Trump. We're going to ask an expert what's behind this act of executive power. And one Metro Atlanta nonprofit is accused of hurting fathers it claims to helps. This is The Take. Let's get it. Hello and welcome. I'm Chesley McNeil, and this is The Take, where we go above and beyond the headlines and we look at the why and how stories are impacting you and your community. We invite the experts in to give their take on today's top stories, and we try to have just a little bit of fun as well as we go along. Well, this has been a stormy month of May, with just a few days left. 3 tornadoes have been confirmed from Tuesday's afternoon storms in North Georgia. 2 separate EF0 tornadoes touched down in Carroll County. There was also an EF1 tornado that touched down in Coweta County. This takes the total for the month of May up to 13 across the 11Alive area, which encompasses all of North Georgia and parts of eastern Alabama. Here to give us a deeper look into this is Keith Stillman. He is the meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service office in Peachtree City. Keith, welcome back to the show. How you doing, man?
Hey, good morning, Chesley.
All right. You were out surveying those storms. Tell us about those storms that we had here on Tuesday.
Yeah, I was out again. Tuesday's storms were a little more unique than what we've been experiencing because we talk about this all the time. We have the wedge front, the wedge front that moves into northern Georgia. The wedge front played a role in why we had tornadoes that spun up on Tuesday. So we had a line of storms move in from Alabama into western Georgia, and as it encountered that wedge front, the shear along that boundary enhanced the shear along the front, and we ended up getting tornadoes spin up. 2 in Carroll County, 1 in Coweta.
How much damage did you see out there, Keith?
A lot of tree damage. Thankfully, a lot of the tornadoes spun up in rural areas, particularly in Carroll County. There was some structural damage to some barns and sheds in Carroll County, but other than that, it was mostly trees and power lines. In Coweta, we got really lucky because it went through the city of Noonan, but it just happened to move through the north side where it was more of an industrial park area. Mm-hmm. And so there were a little more woods there, and then some of the more sturdier industrial warehouses that were there.
Talk to us again about what you see when you go out, what you're looking for when you go out there as far as tornado damage goes.
Sure. So we use a combination of tools. So we use the radar for 1, and then we'll use what we see on the ground for 2, and then we'll plot a lot of the damage we see along the way. And we use what are called damage indicators. Damage indicators are things such as trees, how damaged was a tree, how damaged was a structure like a house, or what the roof, what type of material was pulled off of it. We get to a warehouse, we look at the damage that was caused to that. Was the vent ripped off in the roof? Was a little bit of the roofing material? Was the siding? Or was an entire wall blown in? And all of those give us clues as to how strong the winds were.
Talk to me about our tornado season. Severe weather around here can happen at any time, as you and I both know. But typically, I'd say from February, now we'll say February, all the way till about June, I guess, that time frame. But typically, it's April where we see our peak as far as tornadoes. Is that right?
April is the peak. Now, May can be, and it's a little unusual to see tornadoes this late in May. Not uncommon, we get them, but we're on the tail end of what would typically be a tornado season. But we're reaping what is happening further to our west and northwest. It's been an active pattern to our west, and we're on the downstream side of that, and there's nothing to really prevent what's happening to our west and moving into our region.
So how long could this last? I guess as long as that what's taking place out west lasts, right?
As long as that pattern. I mean, we just need the jet stream. We need the jet stream to get out of here, and we need summertime to actually move in.
And so we have that potential for the next 2 days, right?
Yeah, it looks like we're getting a pretty good wave to move in over the next 2 days, especially on Friday. And so when you have things like that within the jet stream, obviously the ingredients start to come together for tornadic storms.
You guys have been very busy. How busy of a season has it been for you guys going out?
It's been a very busy season. Just in May, we're at working on our 15th tornado. We're still working up in Whitfield County on a track just in our county warning area for May. And thus far this year, we've issued 63 tornado warnings just this year so far, which is well above average.
Yeah. When we talk about your county warning area, that extends a little bit further down past what we call our TV viewing area, or our
right. Your
TV
viewing area, ours includes the Macon and Columbus viewing areas. Some in Chattanooga is up in the north, and a little bit of Augusta is on the east side, and it, covers a little bit more county area. But yeah, a lot of the viewing area in Atlanta, it's taken the brunt of the May tornadoes for sure.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And so hopefully what's coming in for today, possibly, and tomorrow, we'll have to be on the lookout for. I'm hoping this front comes in a little faster. That would limit the amount of severe weather we see, right?
Yeah, the cloud cover is going to help. Keep us cool. Don't let us get unstable. I mean, that's been the big ingredient that we faced the last couple of days. Is it got hot, storms started firing up on that heat. If we can keep it cloudy and cool, we can keep the storms away for sure.
Absolutely. I want to take a little bit of time out to thank you guys, probably some unsung heroes when it comes to weather around our area, warning us about what's coming and letting us TV meteorologists know what's happening so we can inform the public. So we really appreciate what you do. Hang in there, right? The heat is coming our way, so hopefully as that heat gets in, as you mentioned, the jet stream kicks out, we'll see a little bit less of some of the severe weather around the forecast area. So really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chesley. We can't do our jobs without you either, so thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Keith Stillman, and the meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service there in Peachtree City. Really appreciate it. All right, as we mentioned, yeah, folks, we still have a couple of bumpy days before weather gets a little bit better around our area. We're looking at 60% chance for scattered showers and thunderstorms around the area today. It's already raining out there right now, so more of a nuisance rain for us, but thunderstorms could pop up later on this afternoon, and that could be the case for us tomorrow as well as a front moves down into the area. As we mentioned with Keith, if that front comes in a little bit earlier, that would be nice. He mentioned the cloud cover. That would keep us a little bit on the cooler side. It's really the central portions of the state that we'll be looking at as far as the severe weather goes, really just south of the city of Atlanta and further southward. 78 degrees for the high temperature. Saturday, Sunday brings in the sunshine back. Now, Sunday we have a small threat for some rain. It's a 20% chance or less, so most of us won't see anything at all. And as we head into next week, more summer-like weather coming our way as temperatures will finally start to heat up on us a little bit with the sunshine. Maybe some of that humidity creeping back in as well. So ice cream weather, as we say. 87 degrees for the high temperature by Tuesday. Wednesday, 86 with a few more clouds pushing back into the forecast area. But be on the lookout this afternoon, folks, and you definitely want to stay right here on 11Alive Plus, where we're streaming the weather all day long, folks. You get the very latest as far as the radar goes, and we break in at times to let you know exactly what's taking place and what you can expect throughout the day, keep you alerted. All right, don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back right after this. All right, welcome back to the show. A major blow to President Donald Trump's touted economic policy. A federal court has struck down his sweeping tariffs, calling them unconstitutional. Any duty imposed as a result of several of Trump's executive orders are now off limits. Joining us now is NBC Washington correspondent Alice Barr, who's been covering politics for years now. And Alice, I got to ask you this. What precedent does this ruling set for future presidents relying on emergency powers to implement economic policies like tariffs?
Good morning, Chesley. Yeah, so what this international, or rather this federal trade court has ruled this morning, the U.S. Court of International Trade, is that President Trump exceeded his authority, and then they blocked most of the tariffs imposed so far because they're saying that Congress constitutionally has authority over international trade. And they're arguing that the Trump administration cannot rely on emergency powers cited in a number of his executive orders to assume, quote, unbounded tariff authority without input from Congress. So they're saying that he cannot go it alone, and that they believe that that is the constitutional reading of the authority that's designated between the executive branch, the president, and the legislative branch in Congress. So that is a precedent that they believe already exists, and that then this ruling would establish for future presidents and future administrations. Of course, the Trump administration has immediately appealed, a spokesperson saying it's not for unelected judges to decide how to address a national emergency, and it's always possible that there could be a stay before these tariffs are even ground to a halt. So it's not yet clear. You know, we have to let the court process play out before we see if there's going to be a precedent to set here.
Have you heard anything about how the White House is framing this decision now that they're already got an appeal underway?
Yeah, they've actually just this morning issued a new request of this same court, the U.S. Court of International Trade, and they're asking that court that issued this initial ruling to pause its own ruling because they're saying that this ruling seriously threatens the ongoing trade deal negotiations that we all know have been playing out over the course of the past several months. President Trump has been dealing with individual country leadership to try to come up with tariff rates. And he has so far been able to have that leverage of basically issuing whatever tariff he wants and then adjusting that as negotiations are ongoing. But if those individual country leaders know that he doesn't have that kind of unbounded authority anymore, then that could seriously imperil those negotiations that are underway. So the Trump administration is trying to stay as quickly as possible.
Gotcha. Would you say this is more of a political fight or a constitutional one?
I mean, I think it's both, because this court has said that this is unconstitutional the way that they've gone about this. And the Trump administration is arguing that that's not correct. And they're going to have their legal arguments for why they think they have this authority to use emergency powers. The court has said that an administration can't sort of make up its own definition of what constitutes as an emergency. And in this case, the Trump administration has said the fentanyl crisis, the situation at the southern border, are the kinds of things that have allowed them to use these emergency powers. So that's the legal scope. They also have potentially workarounds that they could use other mechanisms to try to levy these tariffs and then maybe come back to the legal issues later on. But as I noted, politically, there's the whole question about, how far President Trump can go in terms of his powers, but also these trade negotiations and tariff policy for President Trump really is economic policy. And it's the central plank of a lot of what he's arguing for how he's going to power this economy. So the politics, of course, is always mixed up in the policy there as well.
All right, Alice Barr, thanks so much for your insight. Really appreciate you. Right. President Trump now has issued a new series of high-profile pardons, granting clemency to several individuals, among them Atlanta-based reality TV star Todd and Julie Chrisley, convicted of bank fraud and tax evasion, rapper NBA Youngboy, after serving time for federal gun-related charges and prescription drug charges, a former Connecticut Governor John Rowland, who served prison time for accepting gifts from the state contractors. And there's signs that this may not be it. Here's what President Trump had to say when asked if he would pardon the men who are convicted of plotting to kidnap the Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
Will you pardon the people who are accused of conspiring to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer?
I'm going to look at it. I will take a look at it. It's been brought to my attention. I did watch the trial. It looked to me like somewhat of a railroad job. I'll be honest with you. It looked to me like some people said some stupid things. They were drinking, and I think they said stupid things. But I'll take a look at that. And a lot of people are asking me that question from both sides, actually.
Since the beginning of his second term in January, President Trump has issued more than 1,500 pardons and commutations, marking one of the most extensive uses of presidential clemency in United States history. Here to make or add some more context to this is Professor Andrea Gillespie at the Emory Department of Political Science. Welcome back to the show, Andrea.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Talk to me about this. What historical origin and intent of purpose of presidential pardon powers? And talk to us about that and how this has evolved over time.
So, it's rooted in the Constitution. This is the one place where a president has almost kind of universal executive authority to be able to make a decision without there being a check. So the president can pardon anybody he chooses. The one exception is that if somebody has been impeached, so a member of the executive branch, including a president or a cabinet member or a member of the federal judiciary gets impeached and removed from office, you cannot issue a pardon in those instances. But basically, the president has pretty wide latitude to pardon anybody he wants. Now, if you want to look at sort of like what the origins of what the intent of pardoning power was, you can go back to Federalist Paper number 74. And look to see kind of like what the idea was. And I think the idea, as I read Federalist 74, is that the pardon power was supposed to be used sparingly because this is a president basically overruling the legal system and overruling the government and basically saying that the law doesn't apply to a particular person. as we have seen the pardon power evolve, the president's office typically has the office of pardon. And so people who were seeking presidential pardons or clemency often would file cases where they would talk about their crimes, whether you could talk about how the punishment might have been too severe, or how the person who committed the crime has turned their life around. And then these cases go before the pardon attorney, and then the pardon attorney would make a recommendation to the administration about whether or not to proceed with granting a clemency or a full pardon. And so what we're seeing President Trump do is bypass that typical structure. And we're also looking at the nature of the types of people who are getting pardons and getting clemency. And so I think the concern that folks on the opposite side of the aisle are raising is that the people who are getting clemency either have some type of personal connection to Trump or his family. They know somebody who was close to President Trump. They are people who are perceived as being sort of politically connected to Trump, politically sympathetic to Trump. And so that's what's causing problems. And I think that there are questions about whether or not having access, making donations to the campaign, making donations or purchasing, his cryptocurrency coins are actually helping some people be able to, get more attention than others would. And so there's that corruption concern about it. And then I think there is the larger issue of whether or not the people who are getting this clemency are whether or not they're actually sorry for what they did and whether or not they'll turn their lives around now that they now have different sentences. What Trump is arguing is that a lot of the people that he has provided clemency or pardons for are people who were targets of lawfare. So of Democrats who were just purposely going after Republicans on things and then blowing up certain crimes. So that's part of the reason why the Chrisleys were able to get that, in addition to the advocacy of their daughter, Savannah. And, we look at some of these other prisoners, like the January 6th people, or, possibly if he does issue a pardon in the case of those, who attempted to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan. And so there was an idea that these were victims of lawfare and that they're trying to right what they saw as the excessive nature of prosecutions under the Biden administration.
Can they be returned, or can somebody override the president? Once he issues a pardon, I mean, is that it? That it's done, you're free and that's it?
Well, as many of us learned at the end of the Biden administration, when he issued pardons, you can choose not to accept a pardon. Most people, if given that offer, of course, will likely take it.
Gotcha. All right. Andrea Gillespie, thank you so much for joining us, and we appreciate all that insight. Yeah, I got more questions to ask you. All right. Plenty more stories coming up for you. This is The Take on 11 Live Plus. We're back right after this. All right, welcome back to the show. What began as a beacon of hope for desperate fathers has become the subject of mounting complaints and financial questions. Senior investigative reporter Rebecca Lindstrom has spent the past 2 months looking into the Atlanta-based nonprofit the Fatherless Generation Foundation. Rebecca, first explain what this organization does for us.
One of the primary missions of the Fatherless Generation Foundation seems to be reuniting children with their biological fathers. This often involves some kind of bitter custody dispute, or maybe the father isn't being recognized by the court. So the foundation charges a fee to find them a low or no cost attorney. I spoke with one father who paid her more than $3,000, but on the day of court, no attorney showed up. The father says he was told by the attorney that the founder, Tori Evans Barton, never paid him.
And at that point in my life, I was in, I was in a desperate point in my life in regards to get custody of my children, because at that time, my son was going through a lot. My oldest son was going through a lot, and it was just a rough time.
Wow. All right. Rebecca, you talked to two former employees. What did they have to say?
Tara Martinez and Nina Wilson were the only two employees we could find, and they say they were never paid either. Martinez, who was hired last year to be the executive director, said she could never get Evans Barton to give her access to the financial records or bank accounts. And I want to note, these are two people who had jobs and left them to take these positions. The reality that they weren't going to get paid happened over the holidays just to make it even worse.
I think she has also built up this what I call prestige equity and this persona so strongly now over these years that she feels like she has to maintain this image that she has now created for herself. But at what point are you doing that to the downfall of so many other people and hurting other people?
Did you get a chance to talk to the founder about these allegations?
I did. She did return my initial call and broadly cited personal difficulties, including a divorce and medical condition, as reasons for complaints and those unpaid bills. She also claimed she stopped working with some of the clients after learning what she called troubling information about them. Now, we also found lawsuits for unpaid rent and services related to her business and even her personal life. However, when we asked for specific responses to questions about her credentials and the complaints, she didn't respond, and all of our subsequent calls and emails went unanswered. And this is just really bizarre, Chesley, because we did find several positive reviews and lots of positive press in the past. So it's just unclear if she has good intentions, but just bad business practices. I mean, needless to say, there's a lot I would love to ask her.
We all would. Rebecca, do we know what happens to the fathers until these things get resolved?
Well, these fathers are in active court cases, so if they can't get an attorney, they're left sort of scrambling last minute to find another attorney. We spoke with one father who kind of got through the process, but the case became more and more complicated, and that is when the organization said, hey, this just isn't what we signed up for. We don't know if we can continue to support you. And so in a mid-case, he sort of got stranded. I will say in that case, she did continue to at least promise to pay some of those medical bills for a period of time. So again, there's just this conflicting information. And the problem is that the stakes in these kinds of cases is so high. And this is really the time where if you know that you're going to get involved with an organization that seems great, but the stakes are really high, you want to go through, you want to look at their credentials, you want to try to read those reviews and really consider if this is the best path.
Yeah, hopefully somebody out there will see your investigation and step in to help these guys out. Thanks a lot, Rebecca. Really appreciate it. If you know someone that has been affected by this organization, we'd love to hear about your experience. You can reach out to our team by calling 404-873-9111. Again, 404-873-9111 or emailing investigates@11alive.com. We're back with my final take right after this. All right, we are looking at, scattered showers, thunderstorms later on this afternoon, and even more as we head into Friday. So last two unsettled days before we go into the weekend where it gets a little bit better. We'll get the sunshine back in. Temperatures will return back to the 80s. In fact, mid to upper 80s as we head into next week with the sunshine continuing. That'll be nice, but be weather aware for these next 2 days, folks. We could see severe weather in our area. All right, before we go, my final take. Have you ever heard of this? Unschooling. It's right, unschooling. It's a form of education that's becoming more and more popular. Instead of going to a traditional school or following a homeschool curriculum, kids decide what they want to do every day, what they want to learn. It's a trend that's catching on with millions of hits on social media. In fact, Kourtney Kardashian apparently supports it by stating that sending kids to school feels a bit dated. Well, although there are plenty of parents claiming that their child is thriving from this unschooling, I think it's just a trend, folks. In fact, the last time I checked, I don't think life experience or no testing can get you into college or universities, let alone get you a job at that. Perhaps you do have the time, the resources, and the energy to pull this off, and I think most of us don't, especially the resources. Not to mention, every child learns differently, with some needing and thriving off of structure and accountability. Unschooling sounds like no schooling to me. That's all we have for you today, folks. Make it a great day and try to encourage someone. Stay safe.